Here we have Dr. Tom, who's from Growmore, which is an awesome chemical provider to monster gardens. He is also an entomologist and has an extensive history in not just the chemical aspect of mitigating pests, but also from the entomology standpoint. For the root zone, we've always recommended Diatomaceous Earth as a top dressing, part of the IPM method of,
right.
Just initial stages of planting, maybe reapplying over some time if you're coming close to the root zone. What is your take on using something like a Diatomaceous Earth?
Yeah, Diatomaceous Earth is really interesting. In the ocean, when you had microorganisms that had silicone backbones to them, and if you look under a microscope, they're like little very
seashells almost.
Well, they're very sharp and very pointy, and they have little spears and stabby things on them, and they're fantastic under a microscope.
Yeah,
so
cool.
if you do an image search and you look at Diatomaceous Earth, they're amazing. They're from diatoms, which had a silicone backbone in all these amazing shapes, as many shapes as like snowflakes. Okay. Now, what happens when you put those in the soil, if you have the larva or the maggot of a fungus gnat crawling by, it's like that thing crawling over a bunch of broken beer bottles. Mm-hmm. It's cutting it up, it's ruining the cuticle, and it kills it. So the Diatomaceous Earth is a mechanical fracturing of an insect, a very delicate insect larva. And like a young aphid nymph on a root aphid before it grows to be a large thing covered with wax, it's a very small organism that could be hurt by that Diatomaceous Earth. Diatomaceous Earth was used to sandblast like swimming pools and so forth. And in the turn of the century in Los Angeles, they put Diatomaceous Earth in all the buildings in the attics to control termites for many years.
Wow.
So you see that termite crawling along, you picture that soft-bodied critter getting all torn up on the outside by ground glass. There's your Diatomaceous Earth. It doesn't provide a soluble silicone to the crop, but it provides a mechanical barrier. So it works. It can be diluted by the soil media you're in. So none of these things are 100% effective.
Yeah, it needs to be reapplied.
But again, you want to do that integrated management approach.
And so that's obviously a little bit different than a topical solution. So are there any really simple opportunities that I might not have thought of when we're discussing this for an IPM approach?
In terms of a garden control of some of these key pests, I think we just go back and hit the key points. Exclusion is critical to your situation. Some of the things like selecting the right root stock if you've got stuff that's susceptible to some of your plant pathogens. We haven't seen a lot of that in some industries and in some production, but in mainstream ag, that's a big part of our lives. We select root stocks that are resistant to the fungus before
so starting with genetic potential that has the ability to already weather the storm is a big part of it. That was our last video was yield potential. With genetics start first.
Genetics are critical because then you're going to see more and more and more of that. What you have, if you have something that's working well in your production system and you've learned how to manage it, that's a key part of integrating production management, another term for IPM, integrated production management. But back to our key points here, you want to exclude. If you do, never bring anything in on your body, on your plant material. Exclusion is, it's that old thing about, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And it's really true.
I love that term.
Yeah, me too. It really makes sense. And sometimes you can't actually play catch up. If you're trying to fight against like a fusarium fungal pathogen in a greenhouse situation where spores are being blown around in the wind, you can't win. You have to stop everything, go back, clean it all up, and start over. A good example is a guy growing vegetable transplant plugs. If he's fighting root rot in that production system, he's missed it.
I see.
You're never going to get there.
I see. And so there is a time to just break things down, clean up, and start over fresh when it gets to a certain critical mass that you can't manage anymore.
Yeah, and some of these the products, well, I know from my company in Growmore, we have a product called Knakal San. These are nitrogen-based surface sterilants that are used to control any kind of pathogen, whether that be a bacterial, a fungal, or a viral, like in hospitals and so forth. Those sterilants are very valuable, plus bleach at the right concentration. You got to go back and start spore-free, inoculum-free on the plant pathogens especially. If there's a mite hanging around underneath a bench, you want her out of there.
Yeah.
Get out.
You don't want to let her in. And again, so go ahead.
So cleaning the rooms in between, you brought up a really good topic. If somebody did have, say, a pest outbreak that was maybe a longer gestation period, like a thrip, maybe a little longer than a spider mite, what would you say? Obviously, you brought it up. You said going with bleach or going with another product. What was the other product you named?
Knakal San or one of those.
San.
Yeah, Knakal San's a surface sterilant. And again, that thing, if you think about those are the quaternary ammonium compounds is the chemistry involved.
Okay.
Those are what are like in, say, Formula 409 you're spraying a counter with in a kitchen.
I see.
You know, we perceive that those are relatively safe around our kitchen. We use them. The issue there is those would have the same effect on a mite or a thrips. It's going to dissolve that ammonia compound's very polar. It's going to dissolve that wax layer again. So if you had thrips hanging out, typically what we do on some pests like that are mobile, they might be hanging out in the walls, they might be down in a crack. What we do is we do a plant-free period, jack up the heat. Okay.
Try to speed up the process.
Try to speed up the process in that fallow period.
I see. And what would you say the timeline would be just for safety and security for a longer gestation period?
Yeah, I would think something like if you're a couple days or even a week downtime. If you could afford it, you would go a longer period in that. Some people who do big plant propagation stuff, they'll have a 2 or 3 week period in there. And there's a field agriculture similar thing. We put down plastic mulch and solarize a lot to just kill what's in the soil surface because our temperatures are getting up.
Oh, so you're almost like baking the soil
like
naturally.
You're baking the soil naturally, 190, 200 degrees
And this
Fahrenheit.
isn't the baking the soil from that book that everybody read in the 70s where you're supposed to bake your soil in an oven before you plant your plants into it. This is a totally different, we're talking about something completely different.
Yeah, what we're talking about here is trying to reduce some sort of pathogen.
In a greenhouse situation where you have a dirt floor, basically, but the plants are going to be above that, of course. You're not planting into that soil.
Right, typically.
So that's great to know about cleaning a room when you do have an outbreak and you're trying to get a reset done. Now, real quick, just discussing, you brought up, and we didn't talk about pathogens very much as we did pests. There are some products that you can feed the plant through the root zone and systemically, like bacteria, to systemically help the plant to fight fusarium. I know that there's a company called Mana that puts out a product called Pristine Bud, and it specifically has a bacteria that you basically feed to the plant, and systemically it has the ability to build up resistance. When using products like that, what would you say the timeline is, or maybe the points that somebody would want to add something? And actinovate's used a lot as well for botrytis and some other things. What would you say a timeline would be? Because the problem I have is I have gardeners a lot of times that contact us after they see the problem, and now they try to mitigate it. But these are problems that need to be almost an IPM approach. And so a bacteria to be given to your crop in order to fight an issue. What are your thoughts on timelines of really being able to use those products appropriately?
The general guidelines are that there are many of these true biological control products, and these tend to be biopesticides as we call them, and these are natural agents that compete with or maybe produce an antibiotic when they're living healthy, say in a rhizosphere, that produce an antibiotic that's known to stop something from occurring, like something that would control powdery mildew on a leaf by producing an antibiotic. It's hard to come up with a general guideline, but what you have to bank on is people have been working on these biocontrol products for many, many, many years, biopesticides as we call them. You have to go with the manufacturer's guidelines of a very good, high-quality, reputable product, because you think about a scientist having worked for a decade or more to figure out the use pattern to make that product successful for you. Almost all of those types of biocontrol products are going to depend upon you not trying to use them as a rescue treatment. In other words, you're going to use a prophylactic. It's prophylactic or preventative, because you want to colonize a rhizosphere with some healthy guys. In that whole situation.
So you're talking about weeks before you would come in contact with an issue.
This is like planning your integrated production management to saying, okay, I'm not going to allow any of these bad water molds like Phytophthora, Pythium, or any of that to get in my system, but to be sure that I don't, if say they did somehow get in here, I'm going to put some mycorrhizae in at planting. I'm going to use actinovate or one of those products. I'm going to use these good guys to be sure that I've got insurance and a healthy rhizosphere colonized by these beneficials, and I'm going to manage my fertility with some organic inputs so they have things to feed on so that I'm keeping that healthy environment going. We never grow things in a sterile vacuum. If you try to do that, life doesn't work well, because then it's just a quirk of nature that the pests are the ones who are most efficient at colonizing and rapidly taking over the whole thing.
Thank you. That's a really good example of really how to use these products properly to ensure the best effect. And what you're saying really is just organizing, managing, and holding to a schedule that's consistent. And really, most gardens are operated as a hobby, though a lot of gardens really should be operated as a business. And of course, we have professional gardeners that we have as our retailers, but we have hobbyists as well. But a lot of those hobbyists, they really want to manage it as a business because they are consuming their production. And if you're consuming your production, you should definitely be mindful of efficiency and ensuring the best effect. Thank you so much for this information. It's really helped, I'm sure, our listeners to understand what the best tools are and what tools aren't the best to be using. So thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.